Hello and welcome into today's edition of the Arizona State Sun Devils Insider Podcast. And my name is Kevin Hicks, and I'm once again joined by the great ASU writer for Sun Devils on SI and my intern Tanner Capolini. We are here to preview the Arizona State versus Baylor matchup that is coming very, very shortly. And Tanner, I'm so grateful to have you on once again today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. We're headed into week 4, coming off a very exciting ASU victory and hoping that they can pick up another one this week.
Absolutely. And I don't think the importance of this matchup, the magnitude of this matchup, can really be overstated. Obviously, Arizona State started out last season in the Big 12, their first debut season as a member of the Big 12 with a loss in Texas. Ironically, they lost to Texas Tech 30-22, and that really set a bad tone for the start of conference play. It left a bad taste in their mouths, but they were able to rebound. They were able to put things together and obviously almost make it to the semifinals of the college football playoff, which is an incredible feat, obviously. That's something that will never be forgotten, but this season might be a lot different. As we look at the schedule they have beyond Baylor, they play TCU not even a week later. That's a major turnaround against a quality team. And then they go travel to Utah to face what could be the best team in the Big 12 at the moment. And then they cap off that stretch with Texas Tech. A loss really could go a long way towards really sinking the season, especially compared to what the expectations were going in.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that Texas Tech game. I know that ASU this week is not playing Texas Tech, but I think last year you could argue that was probably one of the more difficult losses to process on this season, just because it was so close of a loss, and like you said, kind of set the kind of tempo for the Big 12 schedule a bit. So that was a good point you brought up. It is a big matchup in terms of the Big 12 play. Kind of going into the season, and I mentioned this earlier on some of the podcasts we did, where this was kind of one of the games I was nervous for. Baylor, they are 2-1. That's a good record, but they have been not as strong as I thought, to be honest. So I still think that this is a big game. It's important, obviously, but I don't know. I do feel a lot more confident in this one. I'm a lot more nervous for, say, TCU next week than this game. Obviously, is still important, but Baylor, they have definitely looked a bit weaker this season so far.
Yeah, the conundrum that is Baylor is that they have an undeniably elite offense led by Sawyer Robertson, Bryson Washington, Michael Trigg. They have talent at all levels of the offense, but on the converse side of it, they have a defense that has been poked and prodded a lot. I mean, they did play teams with a quality pass game in SMU and a quality run game in Auburn. But they are, I believe, in the bottom 20 of FBS, of the entire FBS, in terms of rushing yards allowed per game. They allow about 186 rushing yards per game. And that plays right into Marcus Arroyo's hands, as we saw with his beautiful game planning the last 2 weeks. I mean, the second half of the Mississippi State game, the run schemes that he was calling up, that he was dialing up, the return of Kyson Brown into the fold, Raleek Brown's emergence as a real X factor in this offense and a potential star, Kanye Udo's solid downhill running style. All of those things you really could use to your advantage against this Baylor defensive line that really hasn't held up their end of the bargain in complement of the offense.
Yeah, I think this is very straightforward for the Sun Devils to win, is to run the ball. This Baylor run defense has been pretty bad. The least amount of yards they gave up total was 90. Like, that's their best outing. So they have just really struggled. And like you said, they've played good players, but yeah, that run defense is just not good at all. And you mentioned the running backs and what they can do. I also think Sam Levitt could have a really good game. They've given up some scrambling quarterback yards as well. So I really think that what ASU did well against Texas State last week was really just having sustained drives, using a lot of time. And I think if they do that against Baylor, you kind of prevent the shootout. This is a really good offense. I'm a huge Sawyer Robertson fan. He has a lot of great tools that you like. I think he's a really good player, but I think in order for this to not be like a high-scoring game, I think running the ball is going to be the key to the Sun Devils winning.
Absolutely, and I like that you brought up the fact that they want to avoid a shootout because realistically, you would probably normally feel better about the Sun Devil defense getting the requisite stops needed to win the game just due to the talent they have. But the depth of the defense that has been hyped up this entire offseason is going to be tested this weekend as Xavier Alford is out once again this week. Montana Warren, the starting nickelback, is questionable, but according to the tone of Kenny Dillingham, when he was asked about it, when he divulged the information, he didn't really sound too confident that Montana Warren would be able to give it a go either. So you're really going to have to do a little bit of jumbling, mixing and matching around. Like Brian Ward is very good at adjusting, but even if you were healthy, there's some matchup problems that Baylor's offense presents to you, such as Michael Trigg. I asked the coaching staff in its entirety about him as a player this week, and pretty much all of them talked about how he's a matchup problem because not only is he a big frame, but he runs like a receiver. He's very fluid. He is an incredible ball tracker. He's obviously, due to a 6'5" frame, he can come down with about any jump ball that you throw in the books. And realistically, there's no DB that you can throw at him that's going to be able to cover him consistently just due to that physical discrepancy. What do you do? Do you focus on man and put Keyshawn Elliott on him? Do you do a lot of these disguised coverage looks that Brian Ward likes to throw out to confuse quarterbacks? Because Sawyer Robertson is pretty good at navigating those types of coverages. I mean, Baylor's defense runs it too, so he's used to facing that. What do you do if you're Arizona State for that potential matchup problem?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other thing too that worries me about this game is Sawyer Robertson has a really nice arm, and we kind of saw ASU struggle with that in the Mississippi State loss. I think that the Baylor offense and Mississippi State, I think, have similar styles. I think that ASU's both wins against Texas State and NAU, both of their offenses had quarterbacks who were good, but they didn't have the strongest arms. They're good players, right? Respect to them, but you look at someone like Blake Sharpin with Mississippi State and Sawyer Robertson, these guys can really drive the ball down the field, and that kind of worries me, especially with Xavier Alford being out. I also think, too, injuries aside, Keith Abney's had a really nice season. He's been good. Javon Robinson's been good, but not as amazing as I would have hoped. I also think, too, the pass rush, Clayton Smith had a really nice year. We've seen him be physical, have that potential, but Prince Dorbra has kind of yet to get going. So I think, injuries aside, the ASU defense, kind of half of them have been what we expect and have been really good. Half of them have yet to kind of get going. So yeah, the defense, I mean, I don't know if they worry me, but I think it's going to be a big test for them. And I think that, you've mentioned this a lot, Kevin, that Brian Ward loves to be aggressive. That really worries me against Baylor because I think they have the tools necessary to beat it. I do think, though, in this game, the best defense is going to be a good offense of just ball control and, running the clock.
That's a great point, Tanner. So I'm kind of wanting to use that as a segue into discussing key players on both sides of the ball for the Sun Devils this week. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and say that for the offensive side of the ball, I think that while we talked about how the offense needs to get going through the run game and the game script, at least in terms of kind of dictating the flow of the game and getting Sam Levitt comfortable into the game, there's going to have to be guys outside of Jordan Tyson that step up in terms of pass catchers. Shimon Mateer did a great job last week, 6 catches, 60 yards, and a 27-yard touchdown. And I believe that he really is a secure target. He probably will be the guy that emulates what Jalen Moss does, at least in terms of finding soft spots in zones and getting you those chain moving gains, like 7, 8, 10 yard gains. Um, but outside of that, I think that guys really need to step up. Jalen Moss is out, obviously, due to being sick. He didn't make the trip with the team. But you have Jaron Hamilton, who I asked Marcus Arroyo about this week. He was on the precipice of having two massive plays in last week's game. That just didn't work out. The kick return got called back, and the deep shot just was outside, just right outside the tip of his fingers. He almost came down with that, and that would have obviously been an easy score. Um, Jaron Hamilton is a candidate to break out, but he's more of a outside guy. Uh, Derek Eusebio maybe gets more reps than expected. Malik McClain, I feel like he's been a candidate to break out week in and week out. I just feel like his Sam Levitt's ball placement has been a little more inconsistent with Malik compared to other guys. That's really the best way I can put it. But regardless, I think that there's going to need to be some pass catchers outside of Jordan Tyson that get going this week.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kevin. The Malik McClain, how quiet he's been, has really kind of been shocking. I really was excited for him coming into this season. He just hasn't gotten going. I think, like you said, Sam Levitt's had some accurate passes. I also think, too, McClain, some of his route running hasn't been the most polished. I don't know. I think when you look at this game, and I mentioned this on one of my ASU and SI pieces this week, they're going to be running the ball a lot, which means Baylor's going to stack the box, and ASU can go play action, take some deep shots. That's where Malik McClain, I think, could really emerge. He's a physical guy, so to go up there, get the ball, I think this is a big week. And, Jordan Tyson's awesome. We have sung his praises, but we saw last year he got injured, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but if that were to happen again this year, you're kind of panicking of who else you have, and just even besides that, you just want other guys to get going. So yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you for kind of the big players. I'm going to say Malik McClain. It was nice to see Mateer get going last week. That was a big positive. And then going over to the defensive side here, I'm going to go with Miles Rouser. He had a really nice start to this season. He's been a good player. He's been one of the highlight guys in the secondary. I just love the way he plays. He plays physical, tough, and I think just kind of an exciting matchup going up against a guy like Sawyer Robinson, who has a really good deep ball, and can Miles break on some of those balls, maybe a pick, maybe even some deflections, some big tackles. So that's who I have for my offensive and defensive players.
I like that pick with Rouser. People label Xavier Alford as the leader of the defense, even Keyshawn Elliott, but Rouser might be the tone setter of the defense with how relentless he is. He's kind of like the Budda Baker of the Arizona State defense. I feel like that's a good analogy. The way he just attacks every single rep with the same tenacity. He's all over the field. He just never lets up, and he always plays with the same physical edge, and that's just something that is infectious. I think that's a great pick for me. I'd probably go with the guy I just mentioned with Keyshawn Elliott. There's probably going to be scenarios where he's tasked with covering Michael Trigg because he's really the guy that's the best physical profile for him. He's a little shorter, but he's just as strong. He moves probably better than anyone in the front seven in terms of dropping back in coverage when he's needed. Also, obviously provides incredible run support, and he might need to more with Cyrus Fiaseu being questionable as well. He was a late add to the injury report. So he's probably going to have to be a jack of all trades once again, and I think that him and Jordan Crook, particularly Keyshawn, are going to be big players in this game.
Yeah, I think the players we mentioned defensively, I think they've all had really good seasons, especially Keyshawn and Jordan. I've been really impressed with them. But I think we're saying more so those players have had great seasons, but just to continue that in a big game against Baylor. But yeah, I know I mentioned there's been some defensive inconsistencies. The linebackers have really come to play, and they've been great. And I think just it's going to be a big day for them. But I think they're up to the challenge, and they've had some great moments, some pivotal stops so far this season.
Absolutely, that's great stuff, Tanner. And do you have anything else to add before we get into our official predictions for the game?
Yeah, I also did want to mention the offensive line. That was a concern we had very early on. The first 2 weeks, I feel like they were better last week against Texas State, though Texas State's pass rush is not the best. I'm just interested to see how they play, and I want to know your thoughts on this, Kevin, because the Baylor pass rush, I thought they were really good coming into the year. They haven't lived up to that a whole ton. They're still good. It seems like the offensive line's getting settled down. I'm just kind of wondering what you see in this matchup with them.
Oh yeah, I think the offensive line is going to be a big factor in the game because even though Baylor's front seven hasn't necessarily lived up to the billing that they had going into the season, there was a lot of intrigue about the additions that Coach Dave Aranda made, particularly in terms of them being strong fits for what he likes to run. Uh, there's still some very good athletes and very physical guys on that line. I think that the offensive line, is particularly the interior, is going to have to pull their weight. I really do, and that's been a topic of conversation within the program ever since it was revealed that Ben Coleman was making the switch to center. As experienced and as good as he was at left guard, any player at that stage of their career making the switch from a guard position to center is a big transition. And honestly, Coleman's navigated it pretty well ever since the second half of the Mississippi State game. He's done a great job. I also want to shout out Himito Abigbo. He's been the highest graded player on the ASU offensive line per Pro Football Focus this season. And he was the guy that was the most questionable in terms of starting, because when the questions arose about Ben Coleman, it was, will you move Coleman back to left guard and push Obigbo to the bench? And obviously that didn't happen, and I think it's paid off. And I think that you're exactly right about you're going to have to set the tone physically in the game by running the ball. And I think you're going to have to drop a bunch of different run schemes, but obviously at the end of the day you have to run the ball between the tackles, and I think that makes that makes Obigbo and Coleman and Kyle Scott all the more important in this game. And if you can run the ball, I feel really, if you can run the ball early and you can build up a lead that Baylor has to continuously push the ball downfield to play catch up in, that's right where you want them. You do not want to start the game off on a bad note and have to play catch up against Baylor. You want them to you want to flip the script and have them play catch up on you. That's what we saw. I feel like the Texas Tech game is a great example of that. They fell behind 14-0 in the first quarter, and while they were able to put a little bit of a dent in it, they were down by 2 scores with 5 minutes left, and they were only able to bring it down to 1 score with a couple of minutes left, and they did not get the ball back. You do not want a situation like that. You want a situation where you're dictating the flow of the game, where you're typically, for the most part, playing with the lead, playing to preserve the lead, and where you have to force Sawyer Robertson to make big throw after big throw. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the big thing in this game is the tempo. And one thing with ASU is that they have not really had the best starts in the first quarter. The Mississippi State game was very tough. And even say last week against Texas State when they ended up winning, they only scored 3 points in the first quarter. So I think just getting going early is going to be big. The other thing, too, is usually with football in general, whether it be at different levels, usually kind of home or away games, it's not a huge factor for me. I do think, though, that is something to think about for this game, though. Going to Baylor, that's a tough, area to play in. I think ASU's away game we saw this year, Mississippi State, that was tough on them with some of the communication stuff, the penalties. That's also another thing that I do want to mention is the penalties is still kind of there. So Yeah, I think if this was a home game, I would feel more confident with ASU. But being an away game, I just think that's a factor to consider.
Yeah, that's good. Great that you brought that up before as we go into the game predictions. So I was listening to Burns and Gambo on Arizona Sports Radio yesterday afternoon, and they had the Baylor beat writer for the local paper on, and he was discussing how if it's not going perfect in Waco, the fans don't show up in droves like they have at ASU. It sounded like they were only about half capacities in terms of tickets sold. They weren't even close to selling out the game as of yesterday. And even though it is a road game in Texas, it's probably going to be pretty toasty. I still am not sure if you're going to get that environment in Waco that you will in a Salt Lake City or in a Ames, Iowa, which that could easily be a factor as well. Obviously, the sport is better in general when the crowds are full, regardless of who you support, what side you're on. But all in all, everything considered, I'm not nearly as confident now as I was a couple of weeks ago after that Auburn game for Baylor. But I still believe that I trust Brian Ward and his defense to get that extra stop or two than I do Baylor's defense, and I think ASU wins the game 38-35 due to that.
Yeah, this is a tough one to predict, to be honest. I think this is the toughest one going into the season. Um, I do think ASU wins, but I'm not super confident in that, as you can probably tell my voice. I think Baylor's. Here's the thing, like I think would you would probably say, Kevin, that ASU has a better defense than Auburn, or about on the same level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And if you look at that game, Auburn held Baylor to 24 points, and that was the first game of the season. So I think you look at ASU, they're going to have more tape, they're going to have more stuff. I think they hold Baylor to about 26 points. I think ASU gets about 34. That would be a one-score win. That's an 8-point game, but I do think ASU wins about 33-24. I think ASU definitely gets into the 30s with the Baylor defense not being the best. And I think that I like the Bears' offense a lot to a degree, but I think ASU, I do have my concerns, but I think even when you look at, say, ASU's like the Mississippi State game, I know you mentioned this, it's like they gave up some big plays, but they were really tight in the second half. And I could see a situation where Baylor and ASU are maybe close going into halftime, and ASU is able to make the adjustments, really run in the second half. They've been a really awesome second half team, to be honest. They've been really strong in that area. So I think that they win this game. It'll be close. It could come down to the last second. If I have it 34-26. Could come down of Baylor's trying to tie it up. ASU makes, the game-winning sack or deflection. But close game. We're in Big 12 play. It's going to be that way. But I do think ASU gets the victory.
All right, perfect. And we shall see what happens in the game. The game kicks off at just after 4:30 local time, Mountain Standard Time, Arizona time, however you want to put it. And the game will be broadcast nationally on Fox. So Sun Devil fans, to show up, whether you're going to Waco or you're watching on TV. It's going to be a massive game for the Sun Devils. And for the sake of the program, we are hoping for a victory that they can establish themselves on the right path in terms of setting themselves up to repeat as Big 12 champions. And that's all we have for today. If you have something else before we wrap up today's show, go right ahead, Tanner.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I just think that this is a big game for, I think, the communication with ASU. And I will talk about it. I think you get the Sun Devils. I think that communication with them, sometimes when the coaching to the player stuff could be a bit smoother. So I think this is a big game to just come out there and have kind of smooth operations and to go to a victory.
All right, perfect. And that is really all we have for today. Once again, thank you so much, Tanner, for joining me. And thank you to everybody who watches this show every day. Your support really means everything to us. And we will see you tomorrow, hopefully after a victory.